Hi guys, I'm Mike Sylvester, and for this learning session assignment, I'd like to share with you a personal story about my own family. Now, I've been married for almost 15 years, and I've got two great kids. My daughter Jaden is 10 years old, and my son Jack is 3. And while there's so many different stories I could share with you, one in particular stood out when I read what the assignment was. Now, this is a story that has taught me so much about the love of God and the relationship that we have with Him. Also, how much He desires just to be with us. Now, when my daughter was born, my wife and I were first-time parents, and there are a lot of different and new things that go on as first-time parents. A lot of milestones, a lot of things you remember. I remember the first time my daughter smiled. It was awesome. The first time she rolled over. The first time that I gave her a bath on my own. It was terrifying. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't trust myself. I don't know why my wife did. But as we grew through that first year, so many fantastic things happened. But one thing that didn't happen yet is that she hadn't started walking. And on her first birthday, she was pulling up on her own, but she hadn't quite taken her first steps. Now, what worried me is that I knew the next day after her first birthday, I would have to leave for a 3-week class. I was actually coming to Franciscan to take a class as part of my theology program. Now, this really worried me, the idea that my daughter might not remember who I was. She might not remember my voice. She might not remember my face. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can anybody forget this face? Trust me when I tell you, people have certainly tried. But on the drive up to Ohio from South Carolina, it was about 9.5 hours. This was really weighing on me. And this was before the time that I was technologically up to date, where we had, video chat and FaceTime and different things like that. So the best thing we could do was to talk on the phone every single day. And we did this multiple times a day, and it was great. And there were some times that my wife would put the phone up to my daughter's ear, and I would talk to her. She didn't say much back. She wasn't very talkative that first year, but that's fairly normal from what I understand. And this went on for the first half of my class, and then there was one day when I got on the phone, and there was something different about my wife's voice. There was something that she was hiding, not on purpose, but more so to protect me. And I finally stopped the conversation. I said, Jamie, there's something different. What's wrong? What happened? And she said, Mike, I really hate to tell you this, but Jaden took her first steps today, and I know you wanted to be there, but there was nothing we could do. We couldn't stop her. She was just up, and then she took her first steps, and she was off. Now, for me, that broke my heart. I was not there to see my daughter's first steps. But wait, there is some redemption in this. As it broke my heart, I was also overjoyed that my daughter was now mobile, right? I didn't have to carry her everywhere anymore. I could encourage her to come on her own. And so I shared that joy with my wife and kind of hid my own desire to see that and be there for that. Now, we continued to talk every single day while I was away, and I would hear the updates and the new stories. Well, Jaden learned a little bit to run today, but she hasn't quite mastered stopping yet. That's what the wall's there for. Right? I'm sure you've seen this as you may be parents as well. Now, the day finally came where I was finished with class, so I took my exam, I hopped in the car, and I drove very quickly, very safely, but very quickly back home. And this, like I said, was a 9.5-hour trip. So I didn't get in until after midnight. And not knowing whether my daughter would remember me, if she wanted to see me, I didn't actually run into her bedroom, wake her up, and squeal with joy like I wanted to. So I spent the night just in anticipation of seeing and being with my daughter. Now, the next morning, I woke up to the sounds of the baby monitor and the little squeaky noises that 1-year-olds make, and I was so excited. And my wife got up and she said, wait, why don't you sit here and I'll go get Jaden and I'll bring her here, and that way she can come and see you as she's ready. I was almost bursting with all of this anticipation, all of this joy, like, gosh, I just can't wait to see her, to hold her, to be with her, my own daughter. So I sat at the edge of our bed, actually on the floor at the edge of our bed, and we had a very large master bedroom. There's probably 6 feet between me and the doorway. So my wife brought Jaden, and she set her down in the doorway, and she stood there as if she was riding a surfboard for the first time. That wiggle, like, I'm not quite sure what's going on. Might have to do with the fact that she was still waking up as well. But she stood there, and she looked at me, and she had this puzzled look on her face, this idea of, I've seen you somewhere before, good sir, but I can't quite remember who you are. And then she'd look back at my wife, and my wife would tell her, Jaden, Daddy's home. Jaden, go see Daddy. Daddy wants to see you. Daddy's home. And she turned to my wife, and she looked at her as if to say, do you know there's a gentleman sitting on your bedroom floor? He looks familiar and somewhat friendly, somewhat weird. And she kept going back and forth between my wife and myself, just this puzzled look, and my wife kept encouraging her, Jaden, go see Daddy. Jaden, Daddy's home. Go see Daddy. And she just stood there, and it was killing me. I couldn't wait any longer. I finally opened up my mouth and I said, Jaden, Daddy's home. Jaden, come see Daddy. It was when I opened her mouth, when I called her by name, her eyes lit up, as if all of these memories had been rushing back to her, and she knew exactly who I was, just by the sound of my voice. Jaden, come see Daddy. And I only had to say that once, and she took her first 3, 4, 5 steps. Those first steps that I saw my daughter take were her running for me. As she took those steps, and about 4 feet away, it seemed she just leapt in the air and grabbed onto me and held on for what seemed like ever. It was probably 10 to 15 minutes. I could have sat there the rest of the day, and I just held my daughter as she snuggled into me, as she grabbed on so tight she didn't want to let go. And I just kept whispering to her, Jaden, Daddy's here. Jaden, Daddy's home. Daddy's here. And this has taught me so much about my own relationship with God, about how often that I think I go away in sin, in just neglecting my own prayer life, and how often God, one, pursues me, comes after me, but at the same time respects me and says, hey, when you're ready, come see me. I'm right here. I'm here. Come see Daddy. And this relationship that we have with God, this relationship that I have with my daughter, where I can just say her name and she calls and she lights up when I call her. This is something that I'll never forget, and something that I share with our students, particularly as we prepare for the sacrament of reconciliation. I think it's so important for us to remember that reconciliation is not a punishment, but an opportunity to reconcile that relationship with God. So I hope you've enjoyed this story. I know it's one I'll never forget. I look forward to seeing your stories and learning more about you as well. Thank you guys. God bless.